up happening is Bastion kind of does his job even if he gets dismantled. And when we had the stream die, we were basically having Skyline kind of take over from that point. So I'm gonna turn it back over to him.
Yeah. So we were saying that with Bastion, after you get past once, it's not too uncommon for the Bastion to get dismounted once you get past that first choke point on the first part of Junkertown, and then you just swap off because the Bastion's done his job already. Though that's not really why Bastion is super good, because if Bastion was just used to break through the first part, that'd be okay. You know, that'd be pretty fair. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the whole world. It'd be quite high in the playlist, in fact. But the thing is, if you do manage to one shot all the way through the first point, and we'll get into the second point in just a bit, but I'll just allude to it for now, that if you do break through the first point, the second point is just Bastion heaven on this map.
A field day, huh?
Yeah. So for the defenders, because we haven't talked about the defense.
Yeah,
yet,
let's
right?
jump into the defender
Let's
side.
switch, yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about the defense real quick. So really, there are only two places on this map for the defense. It's also, this map, like I said before, it gives the illusion of having, oh, look at all the stuff on the map, but really, it's actually one of the most restrictive maps in the game in terms of, it's just like you need to do one thing. So with defense, there are only two places you can stand. You can stand on that middle high ground in the map. That's where everyone stands. You put all your barriers up. You try to farm as much ult charge as possible. And the other team, if they don't know how to play the map, they'll just automatically lose. And if they do know how to play the map and they pick Bastion or something, they'll probably punch through you. And then you'll be forced to fall back to the scaffolding, like the high ground windows and such.
On both sides of the door.
Yeah, above the door. And that's where the Widowmaker 1v1 action really happens in this map. If there are two Widowmakers, the better Widowmaker usually wins.
That legendary duel. One thing to note too, and the reason why people like defending on that second bridge is that it creates a very hard choke. And even for the Bastion strategy, if you pay attention to a lot of the pros, when they're playing the strategy, one of the things that the Bastion will do right before it gets to that bridge is that they'll unmount themselves. They'll get off of the payload and go into sentry mode and let a lot of their team do a lot of the work as they're going back past that little bridge. And once they're past that little bridge, they go back on. Because one of the favorite things that defenders like doing is ambushing the Bastion right at this point, right under the bridge. Mm-hmm. That's when you take your diva, you defense matrix him, your Junkrat pops out of nowhere, throws all of his bombs, throws the his mine. Basically, everyone throws everything at him. If you have a Roadhog, you can hook him really easily because there's just no way that your team can shield the Bastion from all of the angles, right? Before that point, your Orisa, your Reinhardt, whoever you're bringing in has a good chance of defending him from most places. But once you get to the bridge, is no game here. And that's, and the defenders, your best chance of taking off the Bastion off of the payload and gaining the upper hand, getting that ground for your Widow to start shooting at them from then on. Anything you guys want to add over here?
No, Roadhog is an interesting mention here of note because we saw a NYXL match against Seoul Dynasty where neither team was running Bastion for a good chunk of this first point. And they decided to opt for a Roadhog setup with Orisa on both sides. And the other thing that I would like to bring into the topic here is kind of how people are choosing supports in Overwatch League is not necessarily indicative of the meta or what's good on this map, if that per se. Because I feel like regardless of what you're setting up as, you have, Moira, Mercy, or Ana as a primary healer. All of those are fine. Like, it just so happens that the strongest ones are picked at the moment that work with this strategy. So you don't really ever have much diversity with the hero pool because you just pick whatever can heal the Bastion the best during this moment. And that's kind of what you run. But Sky, I wanted you to kind of comment on those two things, like how you approach supports, how you basically choose to disrupt or support the Bastion with them on A, and also just putting Roadhog in the mix because we haven't really mentioned him.
Well, Roadhog is very strong for defense because he can poke out of those windows, remember, above the door. And we see constantly that he can from that position just get fantastic hooks. And also Roadhog scales very well into the second point as well, which we'll, like I said, get into later on. And that's really important on a map like Junkertown that's very momentum based in terms of if you take the first point, you know, the second one really goes very smoothly. You need to be able to stop it. That means having or push through if you're the attacker. So you need to be able to have heroes that are good on both the first and second point, or at least that's a premium when it comes to those types of heroes. But oh yeah, Roadhog's absolutely terrifying when you like above the gate, when you're trying to push through the gate, or when you're just above the gate, he can just keep peeking you from the window, and it's very difficult to avoid the hooks.
I think that we didn't talk about too much of the tanks because it's kind of an obvious when we're talking about the protected precedent. But for the attackers, Orisa, even Roadhog on attack tends to be really good. You can also take D.Va. D.Va is always a good pick. On the defender side, a shield, again, like Orisa. Orisa tends to be favored over Reinhardt in this point just because she can actually shoot at the payload or shoot back at the other Orisa that's standing on the bridge, while Reinhardt is a little bit more limited and becomes more of a shooting target for everyone else in this map. Like we said, Roadhog is a great hero. Zarya tends not to get as much play in this map because, again, with the Bastion being preferred, her shields tend to be not as significant as with other heroes.
Yeah, the first part of this map is basically you want to pick a bunch of shooty heroes, and then you line up, and they line up, and it's just a firing line, like, you know, the Revolutionary War. That's essentially what this map. The first point.
The first point.
Yeah,
you're charging.
Confirmed.
You're charging in with your payload.
Yeah, it's literally the defenders. So first you push them off the high ground, right? You push the defenders off the high ground, and then it's the defenders sitting back in the wall, in the windows, maybe like, you know, maybe in the cover on the low ground with their long range heroes, and you push around the corner with your long range heroes, and you just shoot at each other until someone dies. That's basically what the first point is. That's why Reinhardt's not very good. You generally don't see too much divey type of strategies just because the expanse is so long, it's very difficult to actually push forward.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. I think that covers the first point pretty well. I think it's time to move on to the second point in Junkertown.
Streets phase. Point B.
Streets phase. So this is where Bastion really shines. Like I said, Bastion would be good enough if he just kind of helped you push past the first point. But
Final
here,
boss stage 2.
Yeah, so with Bastion, if you're able to full clear the first point without losing your Bastion or having your Bastion get knocked off the cart, it's almost an auto win on the second point, because the second point has no angle that's more than like 10 meters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, it's just all very melee.
It's very close quarters. Yeah. Even though there's a lot of places to hide, if you have to engage, you're going to be standing right next to them pretty much.
That's right. And also around this time, like near when you get to the end of it, Bastion might have his tank mode, which means you just automatically win the fight as well. So here, if their Bastion, if you're on defense and their Bastion, well, if you're on attack and your Bastion was able to push past the first point, you really, really should push hard. Use all of your ultimates to push through all the way, because chances are you'll be able to get to the third point without a problem if your Bastion is still alive.
And we see that happening all the time. Oh, go for it, Rob. Go.
I was going to say, like, ultimate economy on this streets phase is almost like all bets are off, right? Like, the streets phase is so intriguing to me because it's kind of on par with a lot of the other hybrid and transitional, like, point twos that you have within other payload maps. But I feel like a lot of this particular point feels shorter, if that makes sense. Like, this phase doesn't really last that long. And it's just so much, like you were saying, Sky, like everybody is just kind of like vertically on top of each other. And then like the only route in is Bastion's sightline. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We've talked a lot about Bastion. Bastion pretty much ends here, because once you get past the second point, Bastion's sort of done for the third point. Let's assume that your Bastion got knocked off, right? And you're not running a Bastion for the second point. You actually need to play the game and you know, interact with the other team. So here it's basically, you see most of the time it just devolves into dive wars where both teams pick full dive, Winston, D.Va, the whole 9 yards, maybe a Widowmaker, maybe a Roadhog. Like there's some techie picks like that, but it's basically just a brawl. Like there's very little you know, nuance to your teamwork and strategy. It's basically just you jump, all right, everyone go, and then like you said, everyone's stacked on top of each other. Whoever can get the pick first. It really comes down to like your Genjis, your Tracers. Those are the key. If you play those heroes, the second part of Junkertown is your time to shine, because that's when you need to get the backline picks to solidify these.
And I think it's really nice that you bring that up, because it's like you said, and we see it happen all the time in the Overwatch League. Teams that are able to push through the Bastion and able to hold it in the card through point 1 usually blow through point 2 and just carry that Bastion all the way to the third point, and sometimes even a little further on point 3. They're able to carry that momentum all the way through. But like you said, if they're not able to hold the Bastion and they're taken off of the card, this is when turning into a dive composition actually works really well. Static heroes in the second point tend to be not very efficient, just because defenders can take the high ground, which is actually really protected. This specific high ground has a lot of places to find cover and to basically have a huge advantage over the attackers. So if you're a team that is trying to reposition a Bastion back into the payload, you're going to have a really hard time just because of the angle of that map. So instead, turning into your Genjis, turning into your Tracers, Junkrat is surprisingly good in this second point as well as in the third point as well. It's a lot more effective on the attacker side. I think Roadhog is still quite good. D.Va is excellent in the second point. Orisa still holds her weight. Reinhardt surprisingly not too bad, but Winston really comes into play into the second point as well, being able to leap into the high ground and contest that high ground from the enemy. What do you think about the tanks in this point?
Winston D.Va.
Winston D.Va? That's your call?
Yeah,
They just go together. Yeah.
That's the answer. If this is a test, it's just multiple choice.
A+.
Yep.
All of the above.
Yeah, Roadhog is the tech pick here. If you have an opening to play Roadhog, like if Roadhog, it takes on defense particularly, it takes quite a while for Roadhog to be able to actually go and walk from spawn to get to the high ground to get to where he needs to go. So if you're in a really brawly sort of state where the attackers are really pressuring you, you can't really pick Roadhog, but you could count him. But basically, Winston D.Va will always be your go-to.
And I like that you said he's a tech pick, because he is. Sometimes on defense, you actually see the counter Bastion being pulled out on the defender side. And I think that if you're trying to run a Winston into a Bastion defense, you're just going to have a tough time, right? Winston just tends to die really fast to Bastion, while the Roadhog has a chance to hook him at least. D.Va still works to kind of counteract that. But for the most part, yeah, like you said, Winston does the job, and he does it with flying colors. Rob, anything you want to add?
For what I would like to bring up here would just be like a little kind of another DPS and support mentality is I have been able to personally do some things. I don't know if this is something you can necessarily get away with the higher you scale in the ladder, but especially when people are less coordinated as they are in the Overwatch League, I think that you can really get away with abusing some sneak attacks with people like Junkrat, or if let's say you're not very good at other heroes and you just play McCree all the time, I think that, the getting behind the enemy, doing a quick high noon as a threat, even if you die, gets the entire enemy team to flip around, and then you can rush in with your tanks. You can rush in with your whatever else you have, and you may lose one, but then everyone's on one spot all at the same time. You can do something like that, kind of like Sky said with the tech pick with Roadhog. You can kind of do that with your DPS in a similar vein, also with heroes like Doomfist.
One thing to note in the second point is that there is no easy flanking route. The only way to get into the back line in the second point is literally through the street or through the high ground. If you go upstairs,
right,
so unless you're a hero with mobility, you are not a hero that is getting in the back line pretty much in this map. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Do we want to?
Junkrat has those tires and Doomfist has got the punch and all that.
Yeah.
And then the other side too, that on defense that I was able to basically flip one game. And again, this is like personal anecdote, but it does have some sort of weight if you're able to do this. I feel like if you're kind of getting between moments where you can kind of take advantage of a specific opportunity on Ana, especially now that, you can play her and you don't have to play Mercy anymore. The grenade is humongous on this phase because you basically can annihilate not only Bastion's self-healing, but all of the other things that you may hit with the grenade if you can toss it just right. So I wanted to bring up those two things because Ana is going to see a lot more play. Stage 2, especially if Junkertown sticks around, I think you're going to see some really interesting plays from players that can do anything with Ana, like Jaehong, for example.
Yeah. Basically, the second point is not a point that you want to take out your 200 IQ strats on. Just pick your best 1v1 brawler, whether it be McCree, Junkrat, even Reaper is quite good. All those sorts of heroes, and just go to town here on the second point.
Do we want to talk on the defender's perspective? Like you said, there's not much of a difference.
It's
not
mirrored.
much of a difference. Yeah. All right, cool. That kind of wraps it up then. Let's move on into the third and final point of Junkertown. What do you think about this one, Sky?
Yeah, it's going to be the third point, and so it has the spinny high ground, which is kind of cute, right? And the first
I do think
so
it's like cute.
It's a U, right? It's a U. And for the first part of the U, when the attackers are coming in, the letter U, they have easy access to the high ground. So generally they should be able to push past it relatively easily. It can be kind of like Eichenwald, where the defending team can shove you up against your spawn, like the wall. But generally, if you're able to get any amount of breathing room, you can take that first half of the U relatively easy. And on this is much more of a standard classical type of map where you have more normal angles and there's not as much cheese as the other parts of Junkrat. In fact, it's really similar to the last part of Hanamura. Not Hanamura. The last part of Gibraltar, rather, where you have the high ground up there. And
that makes sense actually. I was like Hanamura. I'm having trouble saying that one.
I don't know about that one.
No, I totally agree. I actually really like the last part of the map because I think it's the part that is the most versatile out of all of them. I think that it's the part where you can actually play the most variety of heroes. You have clear flank routes. You have places where you can create pincer maneuvers. You can take the high ground and contest it and displace through there. Or you can take a more of a payload central approach. The floor is yours over here. I think that we've seen a great variety of heroes. I think Genji shines. McCree's have been shining in this last point. Junkrats.
Widowmaker's still good.
Widowmaker still really good. Tracer is a huge pick as well. As Winston and D.Va. I think are the two heroes that are really preferred here just because they're so fast. I just get into a payload. And usually in this last map is where you're going to encounter the most resistance. Right after you get the payload across from the U, that is kind of like where you get to strap on your pants, man, because that's going to be the final fight.
Yep. So as attackers, you get control of that first part relatively easy because you have easy access to the high ground. Well, the second part, the defenders have easy access to the high ground. Mm-hmm. And like you said, D.Va, Winston, they're just generally the strongest tanks overall. So you never go wrong running them on any map in any scenario. But here they're particularly strong because you don't really ever want to commit to the high ground here because the high ground's a bit limited. And it can be a bit weak if you put your entire team up there. But generally on Junkertown, you have one guy, one hero, one player up on the high ground for both the attackers and the defenders. It's very important to have at least one hero up there. And to have the Winston and D.Va sort of be able to, at any time, just go up to the high ground with the verticality and help out, that's very important without having to actually commit fully to the high ground.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the defender side because attackers, you're just trying to get the point to that last little bit of the expanse. But I think that once you get it to that last little bit right in front of when you actually capture it, that is when things get really tough. And that is when defenders usually have their biggest chance. From watching Overwatch League, some of the teams actually deliberately allow attackers to move the payload all the way to this last little edge, and that's when they choose to engage. That's when they're like, okay, Zenyatta ult, let's go in. Or that's when they're like, Genji Blade, go in on the attack, get him off the payload real quick. And they have a huge advantage at this point. Even if they're losing the fight, it's so easy to stall. Just watch some of the Seoul Dynasty games where you think that everything is lost, and somehow they stall that payload for like a minute and a half and then regain control of it. Do you want to add anything over here, Sky?
Yeah, it's very close. So the spawn is relatively close, and it's a very safe pathway too. Basically, you go from spawn to the point with no danger in the middle. There's a huge area where the defenders can retreat back further than pretty much any map away from the point, like behind the point, because on most maps you hit the point and then there's like a wall. You pretty much can't run any further after the point. Whereas here on Junkertown, as the defenders, you have a ton of room behind the point where you can have your supports back there, you can retreat your hurt tanks back there. So it's a tremendous advantage to be back and behind the point as well. You have easy access, like I said before, to the high ground. So the attackers don't, and the attackers also lose their flanking route. You know that we haven't talked about that little stairwell.
I was about to bring that up. That little
on the left
trench
side of the defenders
with the big health pack.
Yep, the trench that tracers
right
love.
side.
Yeah, the trench that really gives attackers very easy access to behind the defenders. That's almost why it's practically. That's why it's almost impossible to defend anywhere
Before that,
after or before the trench. Because if you try to defend before the trench, then the attackers can just use the trench to pincer you, right?
Surround you, yeah.
Yeah, that's why a lot of times you see defenders hold far enough back so that trench is irrelevant anymore. Basically, the attackers just need to run straight into you.
When you're holding on that corner, you basically are defending that trench and you're defending the main road. You can see them both, and there's no way that people can go around you at that point. And also having control of that big health pack below the trench can be huge, right? If your Tracer, your Genji, or even your Winston or Diva can sneak in a big health pack in there, that can mean them surviving and continuing the fight. But like you said, yeah, that trench is super important. For those people that have no idea what we're talking about when we say trench, if you're watching the U map, is the little pathway that connects the U, pretty much. It bridges the gap between the U, so you don't have to go all the way around. Pretty much everyone who's played this map plenty of times knows that little spot. Anything else you want to add over here, Rob?
I would definitely highlight that the point that Sky brought about having such a deep reserves of escape from a defending's point of view, like where you can kind of stay in that little back area. You have a little bit of a safe route to a side room on your left. You have a very safe route to kind of zip out of spawn in that right area to go into the trench and also to the high ground, if depending on what hero you're playing. It's very, very efficient. And especially when playing supports like Zenyatta and Ana, you can abuse this like really, really well, because you have not only the safe route of escape, but you can virtually stay pretty well covered and support your team from that position. And you have a pretty good sight line at where your enemies are to contest them with some damage. Now, the only catch-22 is you're going to be forfeiting the right to contest the payload if you're going to be sitting back here. So you kind of have to go back and forth on this type of a decision. But there are some times where I'll see like really interesting strategies that people are at my rank or in some of my games where it's definitely the solo queue mentality where people are playing what they'd like. And I think that you can actually do a lot of work on this point by playing something that you're not really comfortable with, and suboptimally even, just for the virtue of having a mobility comp to engage and jump it out in and out of the trench and contest people off the cart. Like, my Genji is not great, but I think that like playing Genji if you need a DPS, or playing a Junkrat if you don't really need it, or even a Pharah here if they don't have a Widowmaker or McCree, like you can really punish people just by having that mobility and that safety of that little area where you can kind of dodge shots and mitigate damage. Even like not running the Winston Diva, you can run the Roadhog and it'd still be okay.
Oh, that's I don't know. Well, that's a novel concept. I don't run Winston and Diva, right? But, well, basically, essentially, the third point on Junkertown is much more standard than the rest of the map. If you're familiar with the last point of King's Row, if you're familiar with the last point of Gibraltar, this last point plays out much the same way. But it also has, so the common theme of Junkertown is it really looks like you have a lot of choices, but you have none. And on defense, that trench that you're talking about before, that flanking route, is just so powerful that despite you have the spinny thing and you have all these pathways all around and it's crazy and it feels like you can do all these things, but essentially the most viable way to defend it is to just defend behind where they can flank you around with the stairwell.
Ignore the rest of the map.
Yeah, just ignore the rest of the map.
Now,
one thing I will
kind of
say,
a really weird X factor that I want to bring up is, do you think that Blizzard would go and revisit this map for stage 2, stage 3, and consider maybe adjusting that little flank route to just disappear? Because the game final point gets really interesting if they got rid of it. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't expect Blizzard to do that.
Trench.
That's a huge redesign. They've done some of them sometimes. I think that the biggest
they did the icon wall change with the
or the Anubis one. They added the door. They've never taken a pathway out.
Never taken a pathway out.
So that would be interesting. One thing I would say, last tip for the attackers, especially on this last point, is saving your ults to have as many ults as possible for this last point is actually quite beneficial, because like we've talked about, a lot of the defending teams will play very conservatively and all the way behind and will try to stall you out for as long as they can. A good team will play heroes that can stall you for a long time too, like Tracers, like Divas. If they're organized even, they'll rotate between tanks and it'll be really hard for you to capture the point. But guaranteeing 3 or 4 ults from your team can be that extra little power that it takes to really capture the map. So maybe not being so willy-nilly with your ults, taking a couple of blanket fights, even if you know that you're not going to get him, and then do a huge push with all your power can sometimes be quite effective in here.
Yeah, trading kills back and forth is really bad for the defenders on the third point, not only of this map, but a lot of maps. So when it comes down to that final part, you definitely want to go in and try to win as decisively as possible. And if that means sacrificing a fight so you can have a full banquet of ultimates available.
Ooh, I like that. Banquet of ultimates. That sounds delicious.
A feast. All right. I think that's going to close it for the Junkertown discussion. Thanks for coming on, Sky. And I think we can definitely continue the discussion into the next topic, which is the super secret exclusive information we got from Switch about the new changes for Mercy and Junkrat as they hit the live service. So let's start with this. So I'm going to run through these, and you can feel free to jump in any topic conclusion. So let's start Mercy, okay? So Mercy's win rates. They have dropped 6% on average, putting her below a 50% win rate in every tier.
Rough.
That means not climbing unless you have performance-based matchmaking, really doing you some favors, below 50%, below Diamond. She's now actually, quote-unquote, win rate dumpster tier, as Ana win rates haven't changed. So even though some of the other heroes haven't been picked as frequently as Mercy, the win rates have been severely affected. Healing and deaths per game are exactly the same as before the patch. This means that bread and butter base kit not really being impacted. Sky, what did you want to say here?
Yeah, so right now, I think that I mean, in the patch notes, okay, here's the thing. Remember, one of the nerfs was that Valkyrie does not give you instant resurrect. So you always have to have the channeling on resurrect. And in the patch notes, they said that they actually didn't go through. The patch notes said that it still gives instant res, but in live servers, it doesn't. So I'm wondering if that's a bug or if it was intended or if there was a typo in the patch notes. But definitely, I think it's pretty clear. It was pretty obvious just looking at the changes that this was going to be an over nerf to Mercy. In fact, I'm pretty sure that she's weaker than she was before her whole Valkyrie remake to begin with, when she had her old ultimate. I think she's weaker now than she was back then, which is a real shame. and I really wish that they would be a bit more careful with their changes. Once again, it's more of it's like an MMO mentality, right? When you make changes, you just nuke it, right? Just who cares?
It's at least different.
I know they don't actually think that way, but it does really feel that way. Mercy's definitely been nuked, so I'm really sad that it had to be that way. But at the same time, I'm very happy because it's better than having Mercy be a tyrant over the entire
Better
meta,
than the
right?
alternative for another 6
It
months.
is if you so, and here's the thing. So we have, I'm going to call them Mercy mains just because the entire community has decided to call them Mercy mains, including Mercy mains themselves. So
yeah, I think they already have accepted it.
Yeah, that's what they call themselves too, right? So a lot of Mercy mains are very upset at not necessarily the changes, but if someone says that they're happy about the change, oftentimes a Mercy player will take that as a personal insult. On the flip side, oftentimes players will personally insult Mercy mains, right? And I think that this is the key here. The game is almost inarguably in a better spot in a net overall type of view than it was before. There's no question about that. Having Mercy be a tyrant over the entire meta was way worse than just not having Mercy at all.
And I think that we're seeing the results because you're totally right. They nuked Mercy to the ground. This type of nerf is a type of nerf that they're basically guaranteeing that the meta is going to change. Because so far, all of her changes have been sort of positive changes for the hero. And even though they've tried to balance it back and forth, toning down certain things, of the overall, Mercy has mostly just improved as a hero, and as people learn how to play her, she just gets better and better. This change is like, nope, that's not going to happen. We're basically going to guarantee that other supports are going to see play because they're just more useful at this point, and Mercy's not bringing in what she was bringing, which is picking a lot of slack. I think that Mercy players, especially in competitive, have gotten used to, oh, I got killed right over here, no problem. Valk, let's go. Now you can't do any of those things. Now your Mercy's not your mistake eraser. Your Mercy still has a really powerful bring you back ability, but it's not like what it used to be.
Yeah, so I don't. Yeah, well,
let's get some more information from the stats here, and then we can keep the discussion going.
Sounds good.
So we have the resurrections per game have actually dropped by 40% on average over all tiers.
That's almost half.
Almost half. Appears to be nerfed to the ground. No. Thanks, Switch. Top tier analysis right there.
Yeah.
And then what about the other hero pick rates in the support category? Ana has an average of 30. Lucio's the average of 30. Moira has an average of 60. And all of these actually are slight player bumps. And Mercy has dropped back down to 50% at bronze and dropped by 20% within Grandmaster tier.
It's being used 50% at bronze and is being used only 20% at Grandmaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, declined to 20% pick rate.
Yeah.
Sorry, not declined by 20, declined to 20.
To 20,
means
yeah.
20% pick rate when GM. So the summary that Switch has here is, while Mercy's still the easy to pick up healer without res being a strong ability within Valkyrie's, confines, she just isn't the same hero. However, we may find that people learn how to get the most out of her kit later on because it's still early. All right.
Oh yeah,
Sky.
And like I said, it's a shame that it had to be like this, and there will be some negative consequences of going overly too far. But like I said, I just want, don't take it. I don't think that anyone should have a personal vendetta against Mercy. I mean, guys, it's just ones and zeros, dude. It's literally a digital character in a game. Like, you can't be mad at a digital character.
Erase Mercy.
It's just code, right? So all I really care about is the overall health of the game. And some concerns. So some players have said that the meta is diverse with Mercy, and it's an interesting question, right? Because Mercy is so strong that it sort of flattens out all the rest of the heroes. And that's something you oftentimes see, is that if you have a game and one thing is super ultra mega strong, then you actually find that you get a lot of sort of fake diversity. In card games particularly. Card games, sometimes you'll see that there is like a card that's like so strong, or like this one combo that's super strong, And then what happens is every deck becomes viable because guess what? All you need to do is just run literally anything with those really OP cards or those really OP combos.
Somebody's been playing Hearthstone this last month.
Yeah, they've all devolved to this, man. Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, it's all this bad. So yeah, it's really like that. So when you have Mercy that's so overbearing, you can pretty much play anything with Mercy, and it works. I don't think that that's really a good way. That's not a long-term way to have a healthy game, and it's certainly very uninteresting because, well, just because you pick different heroes doesn't mean it's actually different. Just because you have a McCree, or just because you have a McCree getting babysit and res by Mercy, or a Soldier getting babysat and res by Mercy, or a Genji, or it's all kind of the same. And when you look at the flow of the team fights, you really don't see a lot of diversity in strategy. Just because, like I said, you have different heroes filling the same filler role doesn't mean that it's always necessarily the same. When it comes to dive, people are concerned that, oh, well, maybe dive compositions will come back. That's a composition. Remember, that's a whole strategy. That's not just one hero domineering everything. Never in dive did you feel, in dive, maybe that combination of 6 heroes was pretty decent, was pretty good. Also remember, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but no individual hero was like super OP. It's not like, oh man, no one said, man, Soldier is just, or like Winston is just so oppressive it's impossible to play any other tank. Sure, Winston was pretty good. He was quite strong in dive. Pro players generally played Winston, but it's not like he's totally busted. Yeah, it was literally irrelevant to play anything else. Down.
Yeah.
And here's another thing too. When you're talking about metas, and you need to be very careful. Remember the sort of dive meta that we were seeing half a year ago or beyond that, or that was in sort of the dark ages of Overwatch, like when it was a dead game, when there were no tournaments, no pro play, nothing like that. We would see like one tournament per 3 months, right? So right now you're looking at the Mercy meta and it's Overwatch League. It's nice, it's glamorous, the teams are really practicing hard, you're seeing all this crazy stuff, and it's easy to say, oh, well, back when there were no teams and the teams weren't trying and they weren't practicing and there were no tournaments, that was boring. And now it's exciting because of Mercy. I think now it's if you see more excitement, it's probably because of Overwatch League and the fact that the teams are practicing a lot more.
And one thing to note is that right now, as the game stands, we actually see a lot of variety coming from the DPS, for example. There are a few heroes that haven't seen much play, like Torbjorn, Symmetra, Hanzo every once in a while. May is very unpopular, Doomfist as well. But for the most part, the rest of the DPS heroes are rotating back and forth quite often. And same with the tanks. You actually see a good rotation with tanks. Reinhardt is a little bit neglected right now, but you still see him getting picked every once in a while. But then you come to the support category and you have Mercy, which just seems to had become the insta pick, right? And people would vocally complain all the time in competitive, for example. If there was no Mercy in your team, it's like, guys, what are we doing? Like, we're already gimping ourselves.
6v8.
Yeah, we're already losing, and I don't think that's a way to play the game. I think, like you're saying, Skyline, that's very unhealthy. If you're not picking a hero and everyone's flipping their bellies because this hero is not there, that's just not cool. And I've been really enjoying playing competitive lately when people are picking Moira, people are picking Ana. Playing with an Ana is actually really fun, but then you also start to notice how handheld some teams were sometimes, because then you don't have that constant stream of healing from Mercy that is very actually easy to output. Now, you have to really pay attention as Ana who you're healing. You have to be very mindful. You have to aim off your heals. And if you're doing this, no problem. You got an excellent healer, move on. But if you're not, you're gonna fall flat, which makes the game a little bit more challenging, more interesting, I think.
It's actually kind of cool because this is something you don't see very often. And I think a big part of what made the Mercy meta not seem as urgent as it honestly was, like if you're a support player, you would realize how absolutely dreadful it was. For DPS and tanks, maybe they wouldn't care as much. But part of the reason why the Mercy meta can work, you can sort of rationalize that, oh, well, I mean, as long maybe you can pick Mercy all the time, and that's fine. Just pick Mercy all the time, and then you pick 5 heroes, right? And that could be a real meta. The thing is, Mercy is so easy that anyone can kind of play Mercy, and it's fine. if we take a look at other metas that have been like this, there was a McCree meta once. I don't know if anyone remembers this. Maybe you
Oh,
guys remember
those
this.
were the times. I do remember
Remember
that.
when McCree
McCree
could
main.
two-tap people?
Sweet.
When people could when McCree could two-tap people from like infinity
Yep.
distance, and he had the
so
fan the
dumb.
hammer that would kill tanks in like 1 second.
Oh yeah,
And
baby.
yeah,
keep
remember
keep
when
talking.
there was a
May,
good 2
May
weeks.
too. May
There
had
was
that 1-2 weeks of glory.
There was a good 2 weeks where literally it was all right. Both teams, they're gonna have their best DPS player pick McCree, right? And then those 2 DPS players are gonna 1v1 each other, and whoever wins the fight. And then the other 5 players basically try, like, it's all just protect the McCree. Like, it's as if you were playing Dota and you both had hard carry, you both had animes on your team, and it was just like, okay, let's follow him around, let's babysit him. That's all that mattered, right? That was a super not fun way to play the game.
I mean,
That's
it was fun for the
because-
McCrees.
It was fun for the McCrees, yeah. But like the McCree player had way too much control over the state of the game. The interesting thing about why it doesn't feel bad for Mercy to be I mean, it feels bad because of Rez, but the reason why it feels okay for Mercy to be an auto pick, it feels okay for Lucio to be an auto pick even, back when people were not very upset at Lucio being auto pick all the time, is because if someone picks Lucio, I mean, yeah, you can debate that Lucio was a high skill cap hero, whatever, but especially back when his AoE was like infinity range, if both teams pick Lucio, I mean, as long as you have Lucio, it doesn't matter. They're both going to be about the same. As long as both teams have a Mercy, it doesn't matter. They're both going to be about the same. Yeah, there are differences, right? But it's not like if we had a McCree, if it was McCree like it was before, if it was May, if it was these heroes where you actually had extremely radical skill differentials and effectiveness differentials, it would feel extremely unfun. So just be careful to
Food for thought.
yeah, be careful to not fall into that trap. It's always going to be unhealthy to have that scenario. It just happens to be a coincidence that Mercy feels okay for some specific reasons.
Yeah, it's really intriguing because you have the whole scenario where people are feeling like something is necessary versus the factual evidence of something actually being necessary. Like that's the very fine line that people are constantly whining and berating about in the forums, but may or may not actually be true. Like, oh my gosh, this guy is so ragey about Symmetra like being so busted in all of his games. It's like, I mean, she's certainly strong in certain ways, but it doesn't mean that she's like a must pick in every situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
like I said, it flattens the game too. It feels really bad as a support player that someone within 500 skill rating can pick Mercy, and if I'm not playing Mercy, they'll be more effective. Or if I'm playing Mercy and they're playing Mercy, if I'm 500 skill rating better than them, if we're both playing Mercy, it'll kind of flatten out to like 100 skill rating or something like that. It just feels really bad for players who played a lot of Ana, who played a lot of Zenyatta or even Lucio, where depends on the
Zen is not doing too bad right now. Out of all the supports, Zen is probably like at the tail of Mercy, like, hey man, I'm still here.
It's true, but if you pick Zen and no one else picks Mercy, you have to pick Mercy.
Okay, there you go. Okay, fair point.
And now we're gonna enter the interesting section too, where the games are going to have Zenyatta's being played, and then they're actually going to be countered because Ana exists, and the grenade just dilutes everything that he can do.
I love that.
Is what you saw.
Ana's getting more play. I love that.
Mm-hmm. So I think we need to keep moving because we're going a little long, but let's jump over to the Junkrat. So here's what Junkrat's changes are. Basically, the only thing that was listed was the blast radius now has fall-off damage within the concussive mind ability. Concussive mind. I said this last week.
Concussive mind. That sounds like a magic card.
Yeah. The eliminations now for Junkrats across the board are down. It says down by 7%, though the damage is only down about 2%. So that would then go into the next category of win rates. They've gone down by only 2% to about a 51% win rate average. And the pick rates are down 4% to a 28% pick rate average. And again, this is very, very small minutia. And it says all of the data indicates that the nerf was really minor. Junkrat remains a strong hero with some highest win rates in the game. His plateau continues to center around his base grenade damage and quick to charge Riptire. So I kind of mentioned this a little bit at the end of the last show where I thought that I've been talking a lot with my duo queue partner about these changes. It was like, well, when Mercy becomes non-meta, that means that you have one hero in the game that A, is going to be moving slower and is going to be limited in what her functions are during Valkyrie for less time, as well as like she's going to have to go stationary to resurrect somebody, right? And then you're also going to be seeing if Junkrat's still being played, that just means that his picks are going to be even more powerful than they were prior, alongside of every single hero in the game. So I feel like this change basically just makes it so that if you're playing against a Junkrat or with a Junkrat in your optimal range, you're not really going to feel this change at all. And then when you are using the kit for mobility, you're really not going to feel that much at all either, because the concussive mines are used for mobility rather than the damage. And this is only one of 3 parts of your kit outside of your ultimate that deals damage. So you're basically playing the hero for what it's meant to be played and not getting these extra kills where you're going to be seeing basically Junkrat's playing hyper aggressively like Jake in Overwatch League, where he's just playing way too far forward beyond what business he even has being, just because he knows he's got 2 reses in the bank. You know what I mean? So I think we mentioned this, Andres, and I talked about this at length. I even offline when we were even in game nights, where we're just like, I don't think you're going to see people positioned like they are in Overwatch League anymore. They got to play safer. They got to not die, because now you don't have 2 undo buttons that you can just have in most fights.
Yeah, at least in stage 2. For now, the patch has not hit the Overwatch League. They're still playing with the Mercy patch, at least until the end of stage 1. And I really like Switch's analysis of Junkrat, how he says that his primary effectiveness is coming from his grenade damage and the effectiveness of how he can load up the Riptire so fast. And the effectiveness of the hero basically is coming from those 2 facts: the concentrated damage of the mines and the ability of him to get the Riptire really fast and still get the value out of that pretty much immediately. I think that the change was addressed mostly at some raging that would come from the hero, where he would just blindly throw his mine into the enemy team and, get a Mercy pick or get the Tracer. It's like, what is this?
He was really OP in melee range. It was pretty annoying. But I mean, Junkrat never really. I mean, that's the sort of thing that doesn't bother me, and this is the sort of change I like. Is the little tap down. Take out some of the crazy scenarios that he should not really be able to do. So he's brought more in line. Thing with Junkrat is he was really annoying. He's my least favorite hero in the game to play against. But that's not like, it's fine because you can still play other heroes. You don't have to play Junkrat. It's not like,
and he's counterable too. Yeah. It's not like he's immortal.
Yeah, like you can beat a Junkrat. It's not a problem. It might be terrible. It might be awful. It might be playing against tech. It might be almost like playing against techies in Dota, right?
Yeah.
It's a completely miserable hero to play against. But at least, games, it's not supposed to be comfortable all the time. As long as you can beat it, as long as it's fine, it's fine. It's not like, it wasn't like Mercy where it was a tyrant over the entire meta, completely warping the way the game existed. So
just because it might be annoying to play against doesn't mean it's OP, right? And it might be annoying to play for some people. Like I could see tanks, especially like Reinhardt people, getting really annoyed at Junkrats when they're getting booped all over the place and grenades are just falling on them all the time. For a Diva player, maybe Junkrat is not so much of a problem. Same for a McCree player. Junkrats tend to not be that much of a problem. So it also depends on who you are, your perspective. But yeah, Junkrat, like you said, can be one of those annoying heroes, but definitely not a hero that is out of line in my opinion.
So a little PSA to close up. Yeah. A little PSA to close out the show discussion on Junkrat and Mercy is realize that both you and your teammates in every game, as well as your enemies, are all learning how to play without 2 resurrections from now on. So you're going to want to make sure that you're a little bit more safe with how you position. And also you're going to have to relearn playing aggressively when you don't have Mercy, or even just playing the game in general. If a pick happens, that's where your cue is generally to be fight it out, finish the push, or like we mentioned last week with our going deep on the lab strats, is just back out, get out of there, reset. You're going to be seeing a lot more of this in Overwatch League Stage 2, which I'm really excited about because then I can finally start like garnering, watching people play Ana, watching people play Zenyatta where they can't just like go wherever they want. You see that basically with Zenyatta now because doesn't have any sort of escape module. He doesn't have a dart. He doesn't have a speed boost. He doesn't have anything. He's just on his own. So if you guys are looking for good positioning within the back line, definitely watch those Zen players. But I think we got to close out the show. So let's do that. You have the Year of the Dog is launching February 8th. That's this week, guys. We're going to be seeing a whole bunch of new events, skins, and potentially a new game mode in the arcade for you guys to go take advantage of. And after competitive play concludes for Season 8, you will see Season 9 kicking off, having Blizzard World available for play in competitive mode. We have 3 iTunes reviews coming in from Keyline Kangaroo of USA, Shugen from Sweden, and Nick the Majin from USA. Thank you guys for your iTunes reviews. It is the best way to support our show. We got a really nice review from Keyline Kangaroo. We don't have time to read it, but it was very, very kind, and deeply appreciate the nice and kind words for supporting the show anytime. And the feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps the show in search results and beyond anything else that you guys can do. That's going to do it for all of that. But if you guys want to find the show, you can head over to omniclab.com/link and find anything you want. If you want to support the show, you can head over to patreon.com/omniclab. Or we're Twitch affiliates. You guys can sub and get your OmnicLab hype emote. You can do that as well and join our Discord community from that link on the website. We have lots of stuff going on. We got people like Sky coming in and questions that people can submit. Unfortunately, we had a little bit of a longer show, so we ended up having to cut the questions so that we could cover the Mercy changes with Sky here. Somebody very opinionated on the subject. We wanted to make sure we gave him the floor to continue that discussion. But Sky, why don't I give the floor back to you? Let people know where they can find you and follow you on social media.
Yep, I do YouTube. YouTube, just Skyline Overwatch. Search it and it'll come up. My Twitter is Skyline OW. And my Twitch is Skyline OW, so come hang out. Now that Mercy's been fixed, I'll probably be doing more Overwatch stuff. And yeah, should be pretty good. Follow me on Twitter for I'm mostly up
memes.
You heard it over here. Skyline's triumphant return, 2018, on Omnic Lab.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Andres, what about you?
If you guys want to find me, you can look me up on Twitter at iPlayGames. You spell that IPLAI Games. You can also find me chatting Overwatch League over at the Owl Recap with Bob, Justin, and Melarina. Things are heating up now that we're getting to the end of Stage 1, which actually I'll be attending in person. I'll be flying out to California next week to catch out the last little bit of the games and to see the finalists, who is going to win the $125,000. Right now, it's kind of up in the air. Spitfire, Excelsior, will Dynasty bring it back? Will the Outlaws defy the laws of physics and make it to the top? We don't really know. It's all up in the air.
Will Linkser lose the flu so that he can play the game? These questions and more on the next episode of Dragon
If you guys
Ball
are
Z.
interested in finding these answers, make sure to tune in to the Owl Recap.
Oh dear. Okay, well, if you guys want to find me, I'm on the tag not Rob on Instagram and Twitter. If you want to find a Hearthstone show to listen to, we do that over at vellenschosen.com. And this week we're going to be covering the card nerfs. Actually, tomorrow I should be recording this, and a little bit of an adjustment for the card ranked ladder system was completely revamped, and we talked about it last week, but there's a little change that Ben Brode didn't say that we're going to have to cover, and we'll do that this week. If you guys want to add me on any of the other games that I play, please join our Discord. I'm always willing to give you those tags when I don't have the airtime to do so. I've been playing Fire Emblem Warriors, Final Fantasy Tactics, the Zodiac Heroes for mobile. Been playing Subnautica when I'm not wetting my pants after the Reaper or Leviathans attacking my ships, and potentially getting Dragon Ball FighterZ so Andres can beat me at another game this week. I don't know. We'll see. But thanks again, Sky, for joining us. It's always a pleasure, and you're always welcome here.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's going to do it, guys. Remember, don't be a lab rat, be a scientist. We'll see you next week, and don't forget to play other supports. See you.
I'm prepared.
Do we not get the music?
There it is.
There we go.
Thanks to everyone in the chat. You guys were super active today. I love it. We always feed off of the energy from you guys. Even if we can't bring up all of the questions because this show would run for 3 hours, we always like reading all of you. Andrew Strokan, what's up, man? Thank you for coming. Same with Smeedy D. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Smeedy D. Smite.
Smite did it.
All Mikey. What's up, man? Thank you for coming.
Apologies for eating on the show, you guys.
Mayo lizard. No, man, you gotta feed that belly. You know, food. Feed the soul. Thank you for coming, guys. Pizzaroni.